Let's do a little bit of a TikTok over the past like 48 hours, if you will, so that people get a sense of just like how, and when we spoke almost 4 weeks ago, we were seeing 100,000, sometimes close to 200,000 protesters a weekend, and for a country like Israel, that's, the equivalent of like 3 or 4 million people a weekend going out in the United States and having these protests. Over the weekend, this past weekend, the numbers I was reading were like close to 500,000, which would be like 18 million people protesting in this country. And it's extraordinary numbers. And then what started to happen, it appears, was like members of the military were basically saying, and I don't know if folks know this, but there's everyone in Israel at age 18 goes into the military automatically. And so this is a big deal. Walk us through some of that and get a sense, so that we can get a sense of like just exactly, when the threshold was met that Netanyahu had to say, we're going to take a pause on this for a month.
Yes, it's really extraordinary. It's the most extraordinary, I think, civil protest that Israel has known since 48. Nothing similar. We're talking, yes, in the last weekend, some people say it was even 650,000 went to the streets. It was completely decentralized. There was no really, it was all kind of groups, high-tech people, ex-soldiers that were high-tech people that were afraid that the high-tech industry will be hurt. Ex-soldiers who were afraid that, first of all, the government maybe will send them to missions that they cannot fulfill. And in generally speaking, they say, we are soldiers, we cannot be soldiers in dictatorship. And the numbers grew and grew. The military was very important in the sense that thousands of Israeli reservists, and you have to understand that the Israeli army is built very much on reservists, especially the Air Force. Thousands announced that they will not serve. This is really unheard of. The numbers of all those who refused to serve in the Israeli army since the occupation, 67 occupation of the Palestinian lands, is something in the hundreds, maybe in 56 years. And now in 1 month, we are talking about thousands. So really, it was immense. And what happened is that the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, Likud member, was really under heavy pressure from the military, from his companions, I would say, colleagues, to go against it, because there was a real feeling that the Israeli army will collapse, nothing less. People are talking about the Israeli army, or at least the Air Force, collapsing. So he issued a statement that he wants the reform to be postponed for a few weeks. Netanyahu, in a completely irrational move, fired him 2 days later, just a day before the law, the first of the laws of the reform, one concerning the committee to appoint judges, was supposed to pass. He fired him just a day before, and I would say in a span of 15 minutes, I'm not exaggerating, 15 minutes from the moment that it was announced that he is firing his Minister of Defense, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets all over the country. Tel Aviv was blocked, the main highway belt the belt highway of Tel Aviv, that is really the most busiest road in Israel at all, was blocked for something like 10 hours by tens of thousands of people burning barricades, building barricades, burning woods, really scenes that we have seen maybe in the West Bank. And that was like this all over the country, even in cities that are considered Likud, leaning for the Likud, like Beersheba, Netanya, and other cities that are considered very right-wing cities. So it was really a reaction that no one has ever seen in the history of Israel. And Netanyahu really had to bow down. And the next day, he announced that he is postponing the passing of the law, and there will start now a process of negotiation in order to reach an agreed upon reform.
And who are they supposedly negotiating with? I mean, I want to talk about this push for the Constitution, because that seems to have sort of grown over the past 3 or 4 weeks. But before we get there, who are they negotiating with? And it also feels like Netanyahu not only made a massive mistake in firing the defense minister because of the nature of the Israeli sort of psyche's relationship with the military. Because, it for, at least the first, 25 years or so of Israel's existence, that was like an existential relationship with the military.
Yes.
Talk about the right-wing coalition that he has built, because this coalition does not seem to be amenable to any type of negotiations, and I'm not saying that anybody on the nominal center or left should negotiate, frankly, either. But they seem very much in transit, and that this is what we're here for, and if we don't get this, there's no point in it.
Yes, there is this feeling, there is this atmosphere in the right wing, in the Likud, and the other parties of the coalition, right wing parties in the coalition, that we were elected in order to pass this reform. Punto basta, as they say in Italian, and that's it. I still. Now, and because of that, they refused to negotiate the whole time, the whole of these 3 months, despite the growing protest. Now they are forced to negotiate. It is very difficult to see a compromise, but they negotiate first of all with the parties, the center-left parties, especially Yesh Atid of Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, but the protesters, although it's a completely unofficial body and not unorganized, they supervise these politicians from above. It's not the other way around. It's not the politician that affect the protesters, it's the other way around. So I think that the chances of a compromise are slim, especially, and I will, touch the point that you mentioned already, especially as the protest, especially in the last weeks, the new demand was not only to turn down this reform, but to go back to the history of Israel that refused to pass a constitution from its early days, from 48, because it was afraid from the idea of equality for Arabs and also, in a way, for women, because ultra-Orthodox were given extra rights. And so to pass, the calls came from the protesters themselves Now it is adopted by Yair Lapid and by the president Yitzhak Herzog to pass or a constitution, or at least a basic right, equality, guaranteeing equality. This, I think, will be extremely hard for the right wing to accept, because it really contradicts everything that they believe in. They don't believe in equality. They certainly not for Palestinian, and also not for secular Jews, and not for women. So I don't see them accepting this demand. And the biggest, the compromise, I think, will not be achieved. The question is, will, after the efforts to reach a compromise will fail, will Netanyahu try to reenact the same reform that was proposed before, and risk a much larger protest, or that he will back down and risk that his government will fall apart?